Walcott, who can run away from them. Blind trying to buy him a bit of time. Ozil, two!
This is Barkley, away from Otamendi. He's got two runners to his left and one to his right. Barkley wants to go alone, and why not?
Manchester City are still alive here. Balotelli, Aguero!
Welcome to the Football Hipsters podcast. It's the English Breakfast. My name is Kris. I am your host, and I'm joined, as I always am, firstly, by Ross. Good evening, Ross.
Good evening.
And for the first time on this English Breakfast format, I'm also joined by John. So good evening to you, John.
Evening, Kris. Apologies, listeners, in advance. You know, I only watch Italian football, so I'm going to be completely lost here. I have no idea what's going on. I don't know what English football is. It's very confusing.
I'm pretty sure you can still pronounce words better than Danny, though, so it'll be fine.
I'll try.
Late substitute. We've cashed in our chips on Danny, and we brought you in as a last-minute replacement. So, thank you very much for joining us. Right, so what have we got to discuss this weekend then? We're going to keep it FA Cup heavy this weekend because they are mostly the games that we've all followed in the absence of the Premier League. So we'll go through them one by one. We'll start with probably the most boring of the lot. We'll start with Arsenal-Hull. As usual, I'd like to get Ross's view because he's not biased. So, Ross, what did you make of this game? Are either side going to be remotely happy with the fact they're going to have to play again?
No. I can't remember what the date was, but I was watching Soccer Saturday yesterday when Jeff Stelling was talking about when you'd have to do the replay. And because the teams have got so many games, he was suggesting it might have to be on the weekend of the next round of the FA Cup, which just kind of puts into context how many games Arsenal and Hull have coming up. Considering both of them, frankly, have bigger fish to fry than the FA Cup this season, neither will be happy with that. I'm sure there was a couple of Hull fans, at least, thinking, just put one in. Just someone anywhere, just put it in your own net for all I care. Just don't make me replay this game because it's not good for either of them. They've just got so much on.
Yeah, it's really not ideal, is it? And John, from sort of taking off your Arsenal hat for a moment, we obviously discussed this game yesterday, and it was a little bit dull, I think it's fair to say. But the goalkeeper, he had quite a good day, didn't he, for Hull?
Yeah, I do think there's a tendency to sometimes overhype a goalkeeper's performance if they are from sort of the quote smaller team against the big club kind of thing, backs against the wall performance, that kind of thing. But he did make a couple of really good saves. I think it was more a case of Arsenal being a little bit guilty of not taking the chances they should have. And Hull didn't really show any ambition, which I don't think you can fault them for. They sat back and defended deep, which is probably the sensible thing for a team to do because you don't really want to go to the Emirates and open up against Arsenal because that will cause you serious problems and you can end up being embarrassed. But I think, like Ross says, I mean, I don't follow the Championship as closely, but Hull are right in the push there, at least for promotion. And, you know, Arsenal are looking at the league very seriously this season and the Champions League as well is a consideration coming up, so neither of them wanted the extra game.
No, there is indeed talk, as Ross quite rightly said there, that the quarter-final, this might be played on the same day as the quarter-final because it's the only place you can squidge it in. Because I think they could squidge it in the midweek, but it wouldn't give enough time to actually prepare for the quarter-final to be scheduled. So, interesting. Yeah, it's a bit of a mess. We will touch on FA Cup and how it's run later on. We'll have a little bit of a debate if we get time. Let's move on then, because the less said about that game, probably the better. I will just ask that actually quickly before we move on. Do either of you see this being as a potential banana skin for Arsenal? Do you still think that they're favourites to go through? Ross, start with you.
I do, but I suppose it depends more on when the tie's played. If it's played on the weekend of the quarter-final, then both teams will probably put out a decent strength side. If it's crammed in the middle on an awkward Thursday or something, then Arsenal are going to rotate and Hull are going to rotate, and then it's going to be anyone's game, in my opinion. So,
yeah, fair shout. And John, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, much the same as Ross, really. It's very dependent on when it is and the rotation. And, you know, I don't know what Hull's record is like with injuries, but Arsenal's is obviously dreadful. At the moment, it's very good because lots of players are coming back. But as an Arsenal fan, you have that sort of horrible fear of we're just getting all these players back and then we're going to get this awkward replay, and it's going to be wedged in between two matches that we don't want it to be, and a load of players will pick up injuries or something, and you can't rotate or something horrid, just terrible like that. So Yeah, if it's the weekend of the quarterfinals, I think it'll be fine, and you would still back Arsenal as favourites. But if there's heavy rotation, then you just never know.
Yeah, could be interesting. Could be interesting. We will, of course, cover it whenever it gets played, whatever that may be. We'll be across it. Let's move on then. Watford Leeds. They kicked off at 3:00 on the Saturday. Ross, as a man who sort of follows a bit of Championship football, I'm right in saying I read a little bit about this, that apparently a certain Leeds United manager who isn't known for keeping views to himself was quite critical of his players after this game, which of course Watford won 1-0.
That's a new story to me. I'll have to go and look that up before I comment on that.
Caught you out.
Yeah, I know the chairman is a mouthy so-and-so, and he's kicked the Sky cameras out before now, and he's saying that Sky have been bad for business and all kinds of things, so it would not surprise me. From what I saw of that game, he'd probably be justified, because it was not the prettiest, and considering how heavily Watford rotated, you'd probably say that, especially the owner would have said, we could probably win this. What I would say about that game is that Scott Wootton scored quite a tidy goal for Watford.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was a good result actually for Watford, because it was one of those. We'll come to the draw in a minute, but it was one of those times where you looked at a side like Watford, and you thought they will want to look to move on in this tie, and they certainly have done. So fair play to me. It was actually Steve Evans was the gentleman I was referring to, because he did the old throw player under bus syndrome.
Well, that's why I missed it, because I hate Steve Evans.
Yes, he's not the nicest chap in the world, is he? He doesn't come across as the nicest guy in the world. But yeah, if you want to look up his comments, it's all over Twitter. So have a look at that. But John, with regards to Watford, then, so they obviously get the victory. It's at home. You would expect them to beat Leeds on home soil. They did do the job. Are they maybe the proverbial dark horse in this year's competition?
Yeah, I mean, I guess so, because the names that are still left in the hat, they certainly wouldn't be amongst the front runners. But because they're a Premier League team, and they're not really fancied, obviously we talk about the draw later and who they'll be playing in the next round. They're one game away from a trip to Wembley, which, whilst that annoys me because it's a semi-final and it shouldn't be at Wembley, it's for the semi-final, which is a completely different argument. It's a good motivation for those Watford players, and it's something for them to play for, because their season is this season and for the next couple will be based around surviving in the league more than anything else. So the good day out kind of phrase comes to mind for their fans if they can get one.
Yeah, and of course I would suggest West Ham might have something to say about the dark horse tag as well. More on those in a moment. Let's move on to Reading then. Now, there's plenty to discuss in this game, more afterwards, to be honest, than the actual game itself, but we'll stick to the game itself for the time being. Ross, Championship side going through. Of all the ties that you looked at on paper, you would probably suggest that this was the one where there was evidently a chance of an upset, but Reading came from behind to win this game. It was pretty impressive from them.
Yeah, you'd have to say the biggest shock was they had to come from behind, because West Brom are normally quite good, A, from defending and B, from set pieces, and that's where Reading got 2 of their goals. Foster, I always get the R's confused. Foster should have done a lot better with one of Reading's goals. I think it was McShane's one. It came straight at him and he still let it through his body. But at the same time, you did look at that one as the tie of the round that could cause the biggest upset, because just looking at the other ones, I'm not sure there were any big ones. Blackburn possibly with West Ham, but this one looked the most likely, considering how poor Blackburn have been up front this season. So it's not a huge shock to me. I was more surprised by the fact that they got 3 goals from behind and got 2 from set pieces.
Yeah, very, very good set pieces from what's the chap's Oliver Norwood, ex-Man United, I think I'm right in saying, was the guy who put them on the rack there. And John, we have to touch on the events of afterwards. For those who haven't seen or might live under a rock, the West Bromwich Albion captain Kris Brunt, who's he's not known as a particularly irritating gentleman. He's not known as a player that incites any issues with fans. He took his shirt off and went to the fans to give it to a young fan, I believe, a young girl, and was greeted with a coin in the face, which hit him just above the eye and obviously left a mark. And fair to say, it could easily have had his eye out. He was very, very forward in his views after the game, and rightly so. We've seen another incident of it today, which again we'll touch on in a second, but I thought this was left behind in the late 90s or indeed the 80s. Is this a bit of a worry for you that this has happened again?
It's never nice and you don't want to see it, but I think it's something that comes up every now and again and will do. It's very odd that it's from your own fans to throw something at their own player. That's a very strange thing. I can only assume it's somehow born out of frustration of one, losing that game, and also just the general sort of style and the results that West Brom have been getting all season. I think the fans are fed up with the players and the way they're playing, and the manager as well. That's the sort of feeling you get from it. But that's no excuse for what happened, and obviously it's quite dangerous and could have caused problems. And there was issues with it as well in the game later on today on the Sunday. But yeah, disappointing, and you can understand Chris Brunt's frustration and the comments he made afterwards. But yeah, he's never struck me as the sort of player to step out of line or say a wrong word either way.
Yeah, it's really, really distressing when you see something like that happen. But unfortunately, it does go on. Ross, what did you make of it? I mean, as I say, we use the cliches. We don't want to see that and everything. And John's absolutely right to say that. But I mean, we shouldn't even be discussing this sort of thing happening with all the security and stewarding and whatnot. I mean, surely there's got to be a way of finding who this is, banning them. But I mean, how on earth are people still getting away with doing this?
The simple answer is there's always someone. You can't stop everyone because the sheer amount of people that come through the gates of an average football game. There will always be someone that has that capability / possibility of doing something like that. It's one of those disappointing things that you can only do something about after it's happened because no one's stopping it. It's just a flash moment, and you can't grab someone by the arm when you see someone raise a hand because you never know what they're doing in a football ground. It could just be flipping someone off or whatever. It doesn't mean that they're going to throw a coin at someone, so it's difficult to stop. The thing that really you have to do is now find them and stop them from coming back to a football game, or ban them for however many months or years or games or whatever they want to try and do. But it's something that does need to be stamped out, but unfortunately the only way you stamp it out is by letting it happen and then stopping them from coming back.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think West Brom have said they will cooperate with the police to find this person, and I think there's a lot of videos circulating of who it could be. So, and as you say, it's one moron in a group of frustrated people, and we all get frustrated with our team. I can certainly sympathise with that, but there's ways of conducting yourself, and that is not one.
I think to Chris Brunt's credit, sorry, John. To Chris Brunt's credit, he still went back and gave a shout to that.
Absolutely,
That's
absolutely.
One thing to remember.
Yeah, and West Brom, I think they came out and made a statement that when they find who the fan is, which I assume they will because there is so much coverage in grounds now, not just for the ground within the ground itself, but the Sky cameras and BBC and everyone else who's following the games, that they will ban the fan for life. It won't be like a few years. It will be that's it. He's never allowed in again. And I think now also clubs share information on any supporters who've caused trouble between them to try and stop them from getting into other grounds as well.
Yeah, and rightly so. I mean, as you say, using the cliche if you don't want to see it is true, but we don't want to see it, and the only way to stop it being seen again, hopefully, is to ban these people and set a precedent for people not thinking, even considering doing the same thing.
Yeah, it takes away from the result as well, because Reading aren't doing fantastic in the Championship, and that's a good result for them. I know West Brom haven't been fantastic this season, as we said, but still beating a Premier League team is a good result in the FA Cup.
Absolutely. And a quick, on a lighter note, a quick nod to Adrian Edmondson, who fans of the popular comedy series Bottom from the UK will be familiar with. He put out a tweet and put, this afternoon I've been mostly managing Reading. For anyone who doesn't know what Adrian Edmondson looks like, just Google him. And there's quite a similarity between him and the Reading boss, Brian McDermott. So there's a little nice little piece of highlight for the day. It was full of lowlights. But well done to Reading, and they are through. Let's talk about another side that have gone through on the day, and they are Everton. John, I'll start with you on this one. I thought this would be closer than it was. Bournemouth seem to have a lot of legs. They seem to have a lot of energy. They seem to go about the game well, but they didn't really have a kind of a final product, a finishing product, if you will. And Everton took advantage of that, and despite the first goal being heavily deflected, probably deserved the victory, didn't they? Yeah,
I think so. The problem Bournemouth have had is, whilst they started in the Premier League this year very well, the problem has been in defence, that they have leaked too many goals, and that they were very unfortunate with the injuries to the players that they brought in. But in January, they didn't really bring in any defensive replacements. They brought in a lot of people up front, and none of them have really sort of hit it off yet. They're struggling to finish chances. So they certainly do create some, but when you come up against Everton, who can be a little bit Jekyll and Hyde in their performances, it's fair to say this season they seem to be a team who perennially should be doing better than they are. They have the firepower and players like Lukaku and Barkley who if you give them enough chances, they will punish you. So not necessarily a surprise result, but you thought Bournemouth might have put up a little bit more of a challenge. But again, they're a team who perhaps are now looking over their shoulder and thinking, oh, maybe relegation, we're not quite safe from that yet, and maybe got one eye on the league rather than the cup itself.
Yeah, and just expanding on that, Ross. I mean, what did you make of the game as a whole, and also what do you make of Everton? I mean, they're a side that divide a lot of people, including their own fans at times. They seem to be very up and down. Do you think this is a real opportunity for them to push on and try and get a trophy under Martin, as he seems to like the FA Cup, and also just touch on Bournemouth and where this leaves their season now?
The FA Cup should be a priority for Everton because I'm not sure they've got the legs / the quality at the moment to push up into the top 6 and try and chase either of the Manchesters down. There's a nice little collection of teams just above them that seem to have a bit more about them than Everton have this season. So the FA Cup would be my priority if I was an Everton fan, or if indeed if I was managing them. Bournemouth, I think the thing to say about Bournemouth is they made 7 changes. And generally speaking, Eddie Howe likes to mix things up for the Cup. So I think he made about 10 changes, or even 11 during the last round. It's like Kane in midfield, who's barely got a kick in the Premier League this year. Distan in the middle of the defence. It's not the strongest team in the world. It was good rotation. And Bournemouth really do need to be paying attention to the relegation zone more than they do the FA Cup, because they were never really going to be challenging for this. It was never a priority. I think they will be fine in the Premier League, don't get me wrong, but it's such a crazy league this year that you cannot put too much emphasis on a cup and then get back to the league and realise you've lost a player to injury or something, or everyone's just a little bit more tired than they could have been, and then suddenly you're right back in that fight.
Yeah, absolutely well said. It's a bit of a tough one, isn't it, to judge how many first-team players you play and how many players you want to get back. And obviously the big teams have been victim of that, which we will touch on in a moment. But before we do, let's move on to the Sunday games. John, Blackburn 1, West Ham United 5. It was a game that had quite a lot. Red card apiece, 6 goals shared. West Ham are through fairly comfortably on the whole. They were largely the dominant side. Dimitri Payet, yet again, the star performer. West Ham, I'll ask you the same question as I did earlier, but are they a potential dark horse, or are they a club that you really think could actually win this?
Yeah, I think they're definitely more than you would put Watford. What they've got in their team is, as you said already, Dimitri Payet. They've got a player of real quality who started brightly in the league, brand new, new in this country, never played here before, settled immediately, looked perfectly at ease with the pace of the league, and looked probably, without trying to be too disrespectful to West Ham, a player sort of above the level they might expect there. He got an injury and he came back from it, and just looks like he's just taken off sort of from when he was injured. Not surprising that they beat Blackburn today. Obviously, the sending off did help, although West Ham did suffer one themselves. But they've got the one problem they have got is a lack of depth in their squad. But when you have a player of Payet's ability and you have a manager in Slaven Bilic, who I think is perhaps a little bit underrated in this country, because he has got quite a lot of experience, they're definitely worth an outside bet. If you like to put a punt on, let's say, because their position in the league is basically safe. They don't really have anything else to play for except maybe pushing for Europe, so they can really go for it in the cup.
Yeah, well said. And Ross, 2 goals for Emmanuel Emenike, who obviously that will help his league form. What did you make of West Ham, particularly as an attacking force? Because I know a lot of people will say, well, it's only Blackburn, they're only a championship side, but any side managed by Paul Lambert is going to be pretty well drilled, and West Ham just took them apart.
Yeah, the thing with Paul Lambert is he hasn't really got them firing yet, and the front line really does need some work. But the back line generally is okay. They normally keep the goals out in the Championship. So it's still a coup to put 5 goals past them, But at the same time, when Payet is having the kind of game he was having yesterday, when Emenike gets the space that he had yesterday for his 2 goals, it's always going to happen. For a Paul Lambert side, you expect better defending than that. But at the same time, as a championship team, are you really going to be able to handle Payet? Because there's Premier League teams that can't even do that. So you've got to look at both sides of the argument, I think, with this one. I think Paul Lambert will be pretty disappointed to concede 5. But again, realistically speaking, they were never really in this FA Cup. They weren't one of the favourites for it. They certainly weren't a dark horse. They've got bigger problems in the Championship because they're certainly not safe this season. So I don't think it's that big of a deal. I think he'll probably just be concerned about morale more than anything after letting in 5.
Yeah, absolutely. We shall see how they get on in their fight for Championship survival as well. But West Ham march on. And speaking of sides that march on, John, I'm going to ask you to try not to be too biased in your views on this game. But Tottenham Hotspur 0, Crystal Palace 1. The winner was not from Emmanuel Adebayor, as most people seem to predict it would be. It was actually from Stephen Kelly. Beaten at the near post was Michel Vorm, who's of course in goal at the moment for the injured Lloris. What I want to know from you is, does this potentially have an effect on Spurs? I mean, everybody has been saying that they are the next big side, that they could potentially win it all, that their momentum is unstoppable. Is this maybe a glimpse into the Spurs that maybe you and I would know too well?
But it's possible. Did you say? I think you meant Martin Kelly, didn't you?
Not Stephen Kelly. Yes, Stephen Kelly was a long time ago.
That's quite all right. I got them confused as well. It was a bit of a rocket of a hit as well. I think the difference is that if you I didn't see the full game, I only saw the highlights. But what I saw in the highlights was a Spurs team that hit the post, the ball ran along the line, hit the other post, got cleared. There was a lot of pressure on Palace. The goal was, I think the keeper should have done better. Tottenham looked like they were sort of dominating the game. It's always difficult to tell from highlights packages. But as to how it will affect them in their league push, which I think you have to say they are in the league push for the league. Obviously, the position they're in at the moment. It's hard to tell how it will affect them, because not being in the cup isn't necessarily the worst thing. It cuts down on the number of games they've got. And whilst they're still in the Europa League, there's always the chance that you get a draw against a team where you've got really long distances to travel, which can make an effect on you. So it's more if it affects their morale more than anything else. But I think because the way they performed, and the fact that they still put in a good performance and didn't win, is probably the sort of thing where the manager can use it as a thing to G them up and keep them going, saying, look, it was just bad luck today. I know Ross would obviously be able to sort of answer it better, knowing Pochettino more from his time at Southampton, but I'd imagine that's the best way you can use it as a manager, to keep the team motivated.
Yeah, indeed. And Ross, Poch Watch, as we shall now christen it. Obviously, we've come to you many times over the past couple of weeks and mentioned about the drop-off point, or the time where it starts to get a little bit tough for them. Watching today's game, or what you saw of today's game, were there signs of that, or do you just literally put it down to, like John says, it's one of those days where nothing went in and they conceded the 1 goal and that was that?
As a Southampton fan, I can tell you that Pochettino performance is what happens when they start slowing down. You play well, you still have the high press, and you look like you're going to win. You look like you're going to create more than the opponents do, and for some reason it just doesn't work. Now, whether that's because they're just tired and the legs aren't there, or because there's something, morale just lowers because you've hit the post, it's run along the line, it's hit the post again, and then suddenly you lose a bit of extra in your legs. But that's what happens when Pochettino's teams go for as long as they do. Suddenly it's not exactly break, they just don't look as good. They have the pressure, but they can't make it pay. And for 2 seasons with Pochettino, that's what happened at the end of the season. For some reason, we were dominating games, taking all the shots, and still losing 1-0, 2-0, 3-2. Crazy games like that. I think Everton was the highlight. We absolutely dominated them once upon a time. I think it was 2-1 at Goodison. Absolutely smashed them. And for some reason, it just didn't come off. And by about 70, 80 minutes, when you thought, right, we're still in this, the team just started to slow down, and they started to wear out, and they weren't pressing as much, and then suddenly the opponents were getting more space. That is the problem with the Pochettino style, and that could be the problem that you will start to see in the next couple of weeks. The one thing I would say about it is that for that FA Cup game, they rotated quite heavily, and except for up front, people have generally been saying that they have good rotation options in midfield and at the back. in that game, they rotated essentially the entire team. They came up against another Premier League team that hardly rotated, and they still lost. So for me, that's a warning sign, not only because of the fitness, but because of the strength in depth. If that's the rotated team that people were waxing lyrical about the other week, then maybe it's not as good as we thought it was.
Yeah, well said. Well said. It's definitely an argument to be had, and I think it's also the Europa League. For those people that say it doesn't have an effect and it's all in the mind, well, they lost to Newcastle after Europa League game at home. They've now lost to Palace, and you just wonder. Does it take a little bit out of them, even if it's just for the sake of a short trip to Italy? You just wonder. But we shall keep an eye.
I would throw in the disclaimer that Tottenham have a better fitness setup than Southampton do, because they're a bigger club with a bit more money. So they could very well make it work. And without the FA Cup, they have got one less tournament to wear them down. But the Europa League is the big one in terms of fitness.
Absolutely. And of course, after a 1-1 draw in midweek, they will probably be favourites. John, as the Italian expert, would you say they're favourites going into the second leg?
It's so hard to tell with Fiorentina these days. There's a lot going on there, and the manager is making noises about maybe wanting to leave. So it depends what Fiorentina turn up. To be perfect, I know it's a bit of a cop-out answer, but yeah, no, I would give the edge to Tottenham. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. You will, of course, be with us on Thursday on the Satchel to discuss whatever happens in that game. So I think I'm with you. I can see Fiorentina scoring, but I just wonder if they'll have enough to keep two out at the other end. We shall see. Right, we'll finish our FA Cup chatter then, or at least our reviews of the games, with another 5-1 and Chelsea, Manchester City. Now, I think it's fair to say, Ross, that Manchester City kind of gave up on this game a little bit with their lineup pre-game. Do you want to just give our listeners a bit of a heads up on some of the players that were making their first starts for City today?
I think the clearest way I can say it is they would only recognise about 4 players. Kolarov, Fernando, Iheanacho and Demichelis.
Yeah.
I think that's all I can see. Zabaleta, Caballero, if you know, the reserve keeper. The rest of the team I hadn't heard of, and I still can't even pronounce the name of the goal scorer because I haven't heard anyone say the name. Is it Forpala?
Forpala, yeah, I believe, yeah. Forpala.
Yeah, they really didn't look up for it just from the starting lineup, and then you saw them play, and then you realise they really weren't up for it. Thankfully, Chelsea were, which made it an interesting watch. They're still my favourites for it, and I thought this was their biggest test. Then I saw the team sheets, and then I saw the draw, and now I think the next round's their biggest test. So it's a strange game for Man City, and I think the highlight from their point of view would just be the image of Pellegrini chilling out on the chair with 5 goals down, just looking like he didn't want to be there.
Yeah, perfectly summed up. And John, this is a bit dangerous, isn't it? I mean, you obviously yourself and myself being Arsenal fans, I'll take you back to a painful memory when Arsenal played Manchester United in a cup semi-final, put out a largely weakened side, lost the semi-final, then went on to lose the Champions League semi-final with Chelsea, and kind of cocked it up royally in the league, and it all went to dust. So is this a bit of a tough one for Pellegrini? Because okay, they've gone out today, and maybe he'd say, well, it's the FA Cup, but they've gone out and they've been basically taken apart. If they don't get a result in Kiev now, this is going to come back to bite them, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, obviously that would be the worst outcome. It was weird, the lineup in itself. When I first saw it, like Ross, I sort of went, I don't know half of these players are. I'm sure there's Man City fans who probably do know them, because most fans, they follow sort of the youth development and know the players coming through, and they're probably excited to see some of them, but not that many at once on the pitch, because it sort of went, okay, we'll stick a reserve defence out, our second choice goalkeeper, and then just throw a load of kids on and see what happens. I mean, Iheanacho is obviously a bit different. He's a real prospect that everyone's sort of spoken about, but it was a very strange decision. They had Sterling on the bench, they had Fernandinho, they had Clichy and company, so they had some big names on there, but he didn't go to them. And when he did make subs, they were only it was 1-1. It wasn't it was only 2-1. It wasn't like they were losing 3 or 4-1 and the game had gone by that point. So it was sort of half a statement of we're not interested in the FA Cup, but there was also his comments afterwards where he was talking about the amount of time between this game and their Champions League game. And the fact that they didn't get as long to rest as other teams, the fact that their team has got so many injuries, he's got so many injuries to deal with at the moment, that was the only players he could afford to put out. So he was making a clear statement to the Premier League and to the FA as well, that they were perhaps not very helpful in their scheduling of the match, because I think this was a game that was rescheduled for television, and it was originally a Saturday game. So he definitely wasn't happy with that, but it was a clear indication to me of the FA Cup means absolutely nothing to us. We don't really care. Even some of the players, Company and Joe Hart, they didn't look particularly upset sitting on the bench watching the game or embarrassed, and just sort of talked to the other players as they were coming off and seemed okay with it, which was really weird. So it looked like a concerted effort of, we're going to concentrate in the league and Champions League. That's our thing this year, and that's it.
Yeah, it was a really just a really strange game, because if you look at the performance as a whole, they got back level, and you thought, oh, maybe this team could maybe get a replay, which would have been even worse for Pellegrini, to be fair. But and they just seemed to fold. And even Ross, a goal from Eden Hazard in the second half. What do you make of what's been going on with him? I touched on this in the Satchel in midweek, and I was chatting to Drew about this, and the Chelsea fans have been very sort of dismissive of what he said. What do you make of his performance today? Was that kind of almost a signal of intent that he is still committed, or was it just that Man City were terrible?
Yeah, he did look very good today, but you have to obviously reconsider the kind of opponent he was facing. There's not many players in that team that I think could handle Hazard even in a Premier League game. So he was always going to look a lot better than perhaps he might otherwise. I've said on this pod before, no pen, no party. I think we have to rephrase that to no set piece, no party for Hazard now. It was a pretty good free kick, I'll give him that, but I'm still not convinced. I think he looks to me like a player that's thinking of other clubs in the summer, and that, it wouldn't surprise me at all if someone came in for him, even though I wouldn't go in for him if I was Real Madrid, because of how bad he's been this season. On Man City, I don't know if you know this stat, but it's the first time they've lost 3 games in a row since November 2010. Wow. So I'm not sure what that means in terms of their season, but I know Danny's already said that he doesn't think they'll be finishing top 4. So I said, I think it was last week, that if they go on a bad run, then you never know in the division. I know this was the FA Cup, but it's still a bad knock. And if you go in the way in the Champions League this week, and suddenly something bad happens there, then you never know.
No, I agree. And John, as a fan of a side that is in Champions League football and does have a congested fixture list, how do you think Man City fans will react to this? I haven't had a chance to listen to sort of the phone-in programs yet, but do you think that they will look at this as a bit of a surrender?
If I was a Man City fan, I wouldn't be particularly happy with it. Just the sheer numbers. I mean, I don't know how many players they've got out injured. I must be honest. The list might be a lot longer than I thought. But of all the clubs, English clubs that are through in the Champions League, you would say they're the ones with the quote unquote easy tie. Even out of the other teams that aren't English, they've certainly got the supposedly easier game. So you thought they'd maybe put up a bit more of a fight in this, but I don't know. Sometimes fans are just sort of happy to be out of the FA Cup. But it's just a weird situation at the moment, because it's very strange, certainly in England anyway, to have a manager who you know he's not going to have the job next year, and you know already who the replacement is, but there's still sort of a third of a season to go. Some players at that club know that they will not be there next season for sure. People like Yaya Toure, there's no way. Guardiola didn't like him at Barca, he's not going to be there now. I think Willy Caballero, if he had any ambition of staying at Man City, his performance today was shocking, to be perfectly honest. He certainly won't be there, along with a number of others. So it's a strange situation for everyone to be in. I don't know how a Man City fan would feel about it right now. I'm sure they're probably very excited about Pep coming in the summer, but as to what it means for the rest of the season, it's not going to be so good.
No, it's definitely a weird one, and definitely one we need to keep an eye on what happens. It could be tough, and we should say as well that in that game there was more coin throwing episodes. Again, I don't really want to highlight it, but it did go on. And more police sort of activity going on there, and it's a shame. Again, a minority, but yeah, no real plaudits for Chelsea fans that did that really, really poor. Anyway, John, do you want to give us the full draw for the quarterfinals that was been announced after the games were played today?
Yeah, there is one more game still to be played. So as you're listening to this on Monday, we're recording Sunday night as usual. But Monday night there is Shrewsbury Town are at home to Manchester United. So that game is still to be played. The winner of that tie will be at home to West Ham. Everton are at home to Chelsea, which is certainly the pick of the ties to be played. Reading are at home to Palace, and either Arsenal or Hull are at home to Watford for the quarterfinals.
And Ross, from that, what do you think? I mean, who do you? We always ask you this, but are you gonna stick with Chelsea? Because that tie away at Everton, it really is a pick'em, isn't it?
Yeah, like I said a minute ago, I thought the Man City tie would be the big test for Chelsea, the acid test in this cup run. Seeing how the Man City team went, the Everton tie now looks like the real acid test. If they can get through that, I still have them as favourites. But you can't really count Arsenal out. There's still West Ham in it, and West Ham seems to just have a habit of turning up against the big teams. I'm still going Chelsea, but you never know with Arsenal and West Ham lurking around.
I think that's a fair assessment, and I like the fact you're sticking by your guns as well. That's good. We always like to see that. So,
if you really want to know, this week I decided to put my money where my mouth is. I put a £1 bet on Arsenal to win the league, Chelsea to win the FA Cup, Bayern to win the Champions League, and Dortmund to win the Europa League. So,
a pound.
A whole pound.
Steady.
I'm a student. That's millions.
You sound like me. It's terrible. I do the old pound bets, but hey, occasionally they come up trumps. See a tweet from last week. Okay, let's move on. Of course, please gamble responsibly, boys and girls. We don't encourage that sort of behaviour, do we? No.
No, never.
No. Right. We've had a couple of questions before. We're going to go to Ross for a bit of a championship roundup in a second as well, because there's been a couple of games played yesterday. We've had a few questions that came in from our Twitter followers, and a couple of them were centered around the same subject. So I'm just going to read a couple of these out, and we'll get some thoughts. So we had Checkaholic. He said, "Would you be open to the FA Cup replays being scrapped?" On the similar lines, Nicky Wilson, why have replays in the FA Cup and away goals in Champions League when penalties are acceptable way of deciding the game? And Pete Gooner, do the FA need to cut out replay games? So I just want to get both of your thoughts on this. What you would do? We'll have a bit of a chat about what we think would revitalise the FA Cup, if indeed it needs revitalising. So, John, I'll start with you. What would you do with this situation with the replays? Would you like to see them scrapped, or do you kind of see it from the point of view of the smaller clubs?
From a completely selfish point of view, as an Arsenal fan, I'd like to see them scrapped just because it means we've got less games. The flip side of that is don't put yourself in a situation where you have to play a replay. The problem you then have though is that the FA Cup, the sort of the glory and the history that we knew as we were growing up in it is kind of gone now. That sort of glamour from it, and the money in it is terrible. Really, it's not great. The smaller clubs from sort of League One down, the amount of money they can get just from one FA Cup tie against a big team is huge. And if they manage to get themselves a replay, that can fund them for a whole year. So for them, it's a real incentive to try and sort of get that either a giant killing or get themselves a replay. So I see both sides of it. So I really struggle to answer the question. I think there's I don't want the old style where you had 3, 4, 5 replays it could go to like it used to do. As exciting as sometimes that was, it's terrible now, and you just can't do it with the organising. I think one replay is fine. In particular, I think it does benefit the smaller teams, and what it then does as well is gives an incentive to the Premier League sides who will complain about the fact they have to play a replay of get the job done first time, which I think is fair, and it's the only way to balance it. The only other way I could see balancing it is that you give a larger percentage of, say, ticket revenues or TV money or something to the clubs lower down the league, so they don't lose out the benefit from replays.
It's a really, really tough one. Ross, what's your views on this? And particularly talk us through what your thoughts would be, having experience supporting Southampton when you were further down the league system. How do you see it from your perspective on that side of things?
It's still tricky for me because when we were League One, we were still thinking of promotion and playoff places. So the FA Cup was even a distraction for us. We liked the glamour ties we got with Man United. But But if we'd beaten them, it still would have been, okay, are we realistically going to win this? Probably not. Are we realistically going to be able to challenge for the top 6 in League One / the Championship? Yes, we should be focusing on that. I'm in favour of scrapping replays as long as the little clubs are looked after. And for me, you do that by seeding the third round. I'm absolutely fine with penalties deciding games because everyone loves a penalty shootout. And I've watched some absolutely fantastic ones. And I don't buy into the idea that you'd kill the magic of the cup by scrapping replays and putting penalty shootouts in, because penalties are more of a lottery than a replay. You've got more chance of winning a penalty shootout if you're Shrewsbury against United, for example, than you do if you get a replay and bring them back to your place. And the only other thing I'd suggest for making the FA Cup better is make sure you pick some decent games. Don't pick Chelsea Man City. I know you got 6 goals out of that yesterday, but why on earth are you picking that game when in the third round you weren't picking Eastleigh versus Bolton, which was the pick of the round for me in terms of TV deals? So, I mean, there's a lot to debate with the FA Cup because it's got such a history and no one really wants to mess with it. But you've got to move with the times and you've got to be a bit smarter with it, I think.
Yeah, I think you make a fair argument. I think the only thing I can realistically think that maybe to add to that is the idea that you only have replays beyond a certain round, perhaps. As you say, it would encourage the teams to play stronger sides in the lesser rounds. I want to get your thoughts, both of you, as well, on this idea of what could be at stake. Now, I know a lot of people have said that the Champions League play should be at stake for an FA Cup winner. Now, I'm personally not sure about this. It would encourage teams to play stronger sides, but my argument to that would be twofold. One is, I think I'm right in saying the Europa League winner this year gets a Champions League space, and yet sides are still playing weekend sides in that. And also, I would worry that, and this sounds really sort of stuck up from a big club supporting person that I am, but if you did get a fairy tale scenario like a Portsmouth, Millwall got to the final, of course, Cardiff, if they won that, I'm not for a minute saying that they wouldn't be entitled to the experience of Champions League football, but realistically, they're probably not going to get anywhere in that competition or indeed qualify for it potentially. So is that really a wise idea? John, what's your thoughts on awarding that place for the winners?
I see your argument, and I get it, and obviously we're both Arsenal fans, but my counter-argument to that would be, what is the point of, for example, Arsenal, who I love to bits, and they're great, and they're my club, all the years that we've been in the Champions League, and I've never realistically thought that we were ever going to win it other than 2 seasons, one when we got to the final, and one, as you said, mentioned earlier, when we went out to Chelsea. I think you can throw the same argument as that. The difference is, I think if you throw that as the prize for the FA Cup, then yeah, it is a huge incentive for other clubs. I think what you'd then see is teams like Palace, Newcastle and whatever that sort of for a while go for it, but then they might have a wobbly patch in the season and it's a time when cup games are on. They'll maybe not throw the cup game, but put out a weekend side. They'll then look at it and go, no, we can really push for this. This is a really big chance for us. And I also think it makes the league more competitive as well, if you cut it down to 3 places. And I think it's just a case of if you win a competition, that's the prize. You deserve to be there, whether you do well in that competition or not. That's by the by. I think because there's teams that have won the Premier League and been awful in Europe. So. Man United were qualified for the Champions League this season, and now they're in the Europa League. It's one of those things. It can happen. If, say, a Wigan won it as they did a few years ago, and they're in Europe, then great for the Wigan fans, fantastic for them. Their team went out and they won the competition. I think it brings a bit more coverage and a bit more exciting back to the competition, and maybe a bit more money as well for those smaller teams.
Yeah, fair argument. Russ, which side of the fence do you sit on?
I'm all up for it. As a Southampton fan, it's a fantastic chance for us to A, win a cup, and B, get into the Champions League. The 2 things I would say about it that do worry me is that A, you run the risk of monopolising it, and you then got the top 4 or 5 teams in the Premier League saying, well, actually, the FA Cup's a brilliant chance to get Champions League now. Let's take it seriously because we're more likely to beat 6 teams on the run to the FA Cup final than we are to win the league / get top 2. The other issue you've got is there's a lot of talk about us losing a Champions League spot. Do you want to defer that to the FA Cup, or do you want to keep that in the Premier League in the hopes that you can up the competition and earn that Champions League spot back?
This is a real tough one, isn't it? And I guess this is the reason why the FA haven't made any decisions yet, because it's just such a hard one to know what the right thing is. But it's a good topical debate, and we definitely thank you for the question sent in there. I'm going to stick with you, Ross, on the other question that we had for tonight, which was from Pigment, Jay Helmkinstein, one of our favourites. He wants to know, specifically talking Southampton, in light of the poor start but strong showing now, will Southampton need significant enhancements in the summer? And I'll add a caveat to that as well. How many players do you expect to be moved on and therefore will need to be replaced as well?
Well, that is the question that's going to dictate the summer, in my opinion, is how many we're going to lose. For the first time in a few years, I'm going into this summer's window with no idea who I want, no idea who we're being linked with or who's a sure thing. Because last year I knew it was going to be Jordi Classy. There was no doubt in my mind Classy was coming in, and he did. There was no doubt in my mind it would be Arthur Alderweireld. Unfortunately, we missed out on him, but I knew if we missed out on him, it would be Van Dijk. This time around, I got no idea. There's nothing because we've already picked up Charlie Austin. I don't think we're going to need any drastic cosmetic surgery, because the issue we had at the start of the season wasn't so much that the players didn't click. It was getting used to life after Morgan Schneiderlin. And I know that there are a lot of people out there, especially Arsenal fans, that say that he could have been a big player for them or that he wasn't the player for them. For us, he was absolutely everything. If you take him out, we were a much weaker side. So to then have to lose him and then have to rejig the entire team, that was going to be tough. And we really did suffer at the start. Now we've got Classy, we've got Romeu, who's the ready-made replacement for Wanyama, who is the only one I think will go this summer. I don't think we're going to need too much more. We've got another striker in Charlie Austin. Jay Rodriguez will be back. If we do any deals, and I'm sure we will do a couple, one needs to be at right back, because we do not have cover for Cedric Suarez. It's otherwise Yoshida, and we already know my opinions on Yoshida. The midfield is quite crammed at the moment. Unless Sadio Mane gets his move, then I don't think we need anyone there. Then you might be thinking another centre-back, just because Jose Font is getting on in years now. You might need to think about someone to replace him, but do you then look at Jason McCarthy in the youth setup? I don't expect mammoth amounts of movement from us this season, or this summer, I should say. Depends realistically on how many we lose, because if Pella goes to Italy, then we're going to need another target man. And if Wanyama goes, which I think he will, then we might want more cover. But I don't think we need too many changes, personally.
No, fair enough. Good answer. Like it. Thorough. John, I'm going to throw you a curveball with Southampton here. Out of your knowledge of Serie A, give me maybe one or two players that you think would be gettable for a club like Southampton, and the reasons why you'd go and get them.
Oh, wow. That's that really
Drop
is a
that on you,
curveball.
haven't
Yeah, cheers. It's tough because I don't, like Ross says, I'm not sure that Southampton necessarily need lots of players. If Pella goes, there's not really. There's only two players in Syria who are similar in any way to him. One's Luca Toni, who's nearly 38, who's obviously is retiring at the end of the season. The other one is Mario Mandzukic, who's at Juventus, so that certainly won't happen. In terms of midfielders, I think there's the possibility of someone like Lucas Biglia, if they wanted a sort of more experienced player in midfield who can sort of spray the ball about and help cover the back four and just control the tempo of a game. He's certainly gettable. I think he's gettable for a lot of Premier League clubs. But in terms of actual Italian players, as I've said many times before, I'd be very surprised if any of them move. They don't generally tend to leave Italy. They like it there. But Biglia would be certainly a big one. There's a couple of young, exciting forwards that sort of play on the wing at Lazio, like Keita and a few others who've been doing decent this season. Kishner, who's only just come in from Ajax, I believe, as well, who possibly could get picked up by a Premier League club. They're technically good. They're fast. Attacking players can play across the front three. So they certainly look like the sort of players that Southampton would be interested in the sort of the style that I've seen them play anyway.
I'll give you prior warning. You'll probably end up seeing a lot more of Gaston Ramirez next season, John.
Yes, sadly.
God bless him. He's still trying, isn't he?
I will certainly enjoy seeing Graziano Pella. He's a player I do very much like. I do like watching him.
handsome bugger as well. So there you go. There's some names for you to chew over us, so you can have a think about those. We did have one other question, which we think we might have answered. I think I'm right in saying, and in fact, it was actually that question about from Jack about the winners of the FA Cup having to finish in the top 7 to get a Europa League playoff space. John, we think that is the case already, don't we?
If you win the FA Cup, you get awarded a Europa League spot. I think it's a qualifying space off the top of my head. I'd have to look it up, which I shall try and find out now. But whilst we're recording, but I'm pretty sure it's a qualifying space you get. I know last year, because we were in the because Arsenal won the FA Cup and we were in the Champions League, it went down a position in the league, so it was down to 7th place. I think the 7th place team got the Europa League qualifier instead, rather than the runner-up. I think, wasn't it?
I think you're right. Yeah, it's so complicated.
It was Southampton that picked it up. I was
no,
won in the final last year.
Of course it was.
And we went in at the second round because we had Vitesse's second round, and then
sorry, my mistake. The runner-up does still get in a space as well, but because Arsenal finished in the Champions League, a European spot has to move down in the leagues, in the Europa League as well. So it goes down to the next team, which is why Southampton got it, and Southampton wanted. I can't even remember who we played in the final now. Villa. Yeah, that was it. Yeah, very confusing because it used to be the runner-up, then it wasn't, then it was again. So yeah.
So the bottom line is we're all quite confused, but
essentially, if you would enjoy reading the FA's rulebook on who gets what position and whatever, I had the pleasure of reading the UEFA's Champions League one on what players qualify for a club if they've already played in a qualifying round and whether they could play in competitions. That was a very interesting and fun book to read.
That was a real night in for you, that wasn't it?
Yeah, that was great.
Good stuff. Well, there we go. Hopefully, we've answered that question quite well. Right, before we nip off then, Ross, do you want to just give us a quick update? Because there was a nearly full championship programme this Saturday with some significant results for some teams and a few things that you noticed. So do you want to give our listeners a quick update on what happened on Saturday?
Yeah, there were some big results, even if not for the table, just for the teams. One of them was Sheffield Wednesday, who we've been talking about a lot on this pod as potential dark horses for the playoffs or perhaps even automatic promotion. They actually managed to, or contrived to, lose the game to Preston North End. 1-0, I believe it was a very late goal as well. Let me just check. 73 minutes from Joe Garner, who I'm a big fan of Joe Garner because he scored a very Matt Latiz goal in League One last season, but that's a complete sidetrack. So Sheffield Wednesday managed to lose 1-0, which is a big result for the top 6, especially since Cardiff managed to get 4 past Brighton and Hove. Now, I think we had someone a couple of weeks ago asking what's happened to Brighton, and I said it was their back line that was normally the problem, because they just or did I say it was the strike force? No, I'm sure I said it was the back line.
I think it's the back line, yeah.
Yeah, because that is the problem. So if I said strike force, then I'm an idiot. The back line, again, was very susceptible. And Cardiff, as a team that don't normally score a lot of goals in the Championship, or at least haven't been known for being prolific this season, to get 4 against Brighton Hove is a huge result. Lex Immer's got 1 as well, so I'd like to just toot my own horn for picking him as one of the Championship players to be careful of. Derby, again, that's a big result for Derby. They managed to win 3-1 away at Brentford, which is always a tricky tie. They managed to score 3. I think it was in the last 10 minutes they managed to get. And considering the managerial situation there and the recent run they've been on, that is a huge result for Derby. The only other result I would pick out is, only the 2, I should say, are the relegation areas, where Charlton managed to lose 3-0 to Fulham, who have not been on the best of runs lately either. And Bolton Wanderers got a very big point against Queen's Park Rangers that finished 1-1.
Yeah, last minute equalisers on it for QPR. I think that was Bolton were right on the edge of a massive 3 points, and then got pinned back very, very late on. So they'll be
90 plus 3 minutes.
Ouch. And there was quite an amusing team sheet for Charlton on the day. I'll leave it at that, probably as a family show. But if you are of a suitable age to have a little giggle at very, very childish humour, then do look up their substitutes bench from yesterday. It was quite funny. Not that me and John chuckled at all. Right. That's pretty much it for us this week. We should, of course, mention... In fact, actually, before we do that, John, breaking news. I hear you have clarification on that,
yes,
that question.
I've just double checked again, so we're all horribly wrong. It's been changed from this season, so the loser of the FA Cup final no longer gets Europa League space, even if the winning team already has a spot in Europe. That is UEFA decision. They've changed the rules.
Aha. So
Yes.
it was a good job we checked then after all
Yes.
that.
So there you go. So if a team that is in Europe already qualified in the league, then no, the runners-up will not get the spot. And it's just done on league positions to qualify for Europe this year, unless you win the FA Cup and you are not qualified for it in the league.
So at Checking Endos, lads, very, very worthwhile asking that question because we've all learned something tonight.
I had to read that book very quickly. It's terrible.
Great fun as well. Before we leave you, we'll just touch on the Premier League programme for next week, so everyone's got a heads up on who's playing whom. We will, of course, be back next Sunday night to cover all these games. So on the Saturday, West Ham and Sunderland. That's a pretty big game for both sides, I suppose you'd say now, at both ends of the table. Stoke and Villa are a 3 o'clock kickoff, as are Watford, Bournemouth, Southampton. Ross, you've got Chelsea coming down to your patch, and Leicester play at home to Norwich, looking to get back on track after their defeat last week. West Bromwich Albion, hopefully minus coins, will be playing at home to Crystal Palace. That's the 5:30 game. And then on the Sunday, Newcastle-Manchester City is postponed, as is Liverpool-Everton, because those two teams will play in the Capital One Cup final. We will, of course, cover that on the Sunday night as well. The big game of the Premier League of the day is probably Manchester United-Arsenal. That's at Old Trafford in the 2 o'clock kickoff. At the same time, Tottenham play Swansea after their Europa Cup game in midweek. They're moved to the Sunday. So we will be across all of those games as usual. If you have any questions for us, do ping them our way. John, we've got a pod coming up tomorrow night. I understand, or I'm pretty sure, you'll be covering quite a big game in Italy tomorrow night. Do you want to give that a bit of a mention?
Yes, my mind almost went blank then. I will be talking about Napoli-Milan. It is yet to be played because it will be tomorrow night, and it will be certainly the biggest game of this weekend so far. But already some good results to talk about. But I'm really looking forward to that one, and that will be fresh in the memory as well because that will finish just before we start recording. So
yes, indeed.
Good one to discuss. See how Napoli get on. We get to see how they got on, obviously, in Europe. Not so marvellous, but see how they recover in the league after their defeat to Juventus.
Yeah, big game. And Milan certainly in an upturn of form, so that will be very, very good to discuss. And Ross, do you care to utter a prediction for the FA Cup final FA Cup game that is tomorrow? Manchester United going down to Shrewsbury to face Mickey Mellon's men. What can it get worse for Louis van Gaal?
Oh, of course it could. I don't want to say this just for the joke, but I do have a sneaky suspicion about Shrewsbury. Really, really do. After Midtjylland last week, after all the talk, after such a bad run they've been on lately, wouldn't put it past Shrewsbury to win 1-0, 2-1 off a set piece or something. So, yeah, I'm going to go Shrewsbury personally. I'm probably going to be wrong, but I'm going to go Shrewsbury.
Would be a massive upset, even in the circumstances. You would think that would be a
He'd have to go after that, surely. Surely he'd have to go after that.
It does have a little bit of a reek of MK Dons of a season ago, doesn't it? Maybe just that. I fancy both teams will score. I shall say no more than that. We shall see. Okay, as usual, if you don't already, please give us a follow at the FH Podcast. If it's the first time you're listening to us, welcome. Do tune in again. We're here every Sunday night / Monday morning whenever you pick up your audio bits and bobs. We do the Sunday night show is where we cover all things English or British football. And on the Monday evening, which comes out on a Tuesday, we do the full European pod looking at the 4 major European leagues, France, Italy, Spain and Germany. And we also have another pod, loads of pods. Next week, we have another Satchel edition where myself and John will go through the week's European action, both Champions League and Europa League. And of course, Arsenal, Barcelona, Juventus, Bayern Munich will be top of that bill. So do tune in for those. And also, we have a blog going up tomorrow from one of our listeners, who I will actually find his name because I don't want to miss him out. But he has given us a blog. His name is Matt. And he's given us a blog on Polish football, which is up now. And in fact, I should mention we have another blog going up as well, which is, and again, doing this all live. You've got to love it, haven't you? Live radio, everybody. We got sent a blog on the Women's Super League. which is I'm going to post tomorrow in advance of our podcast being recorded, and it's from @RLF86, which is Fred Thurbin. He's written a full preview on the women's upcoming Super League season. There's a full preview of all the teams, players to look out for, new signings, etc. So that will go live tomorrow, probably tomorrow afternoon, Monday afternoon sometime. So do give that a read as well. I think that's everything. Yes, I can't think of anything else we can cover, but please do nip along to YouTube, leave us some comments. If you get 5 minutes, please leave us an iTunes review. We really appreciate those reviews. And all that remains to really be said is for me to thank both John and Ross. Thank you both for your time this evening, gentlemen.
Pleasure as ever.
Cheers, Chris. Thank you.
And yes, we will speak to you on tomorrow's pod. As usual, I shall say the words of the pod: keep your beard strong and your glasses trendy. We thank you for the questions, we thank you for your time, and we will speak to you on the pod tomorrow.
It's Bergkamp. That's magnificent. Mark Vivian Foet, Sinclair's cross over Cunningham. Di Canio! Oh, I do not believe that. That is sensational.
Tisia. He's going for goal again. Oh! Only Matthew Le Tissier can score goals like that.
Collymore closing in.